This is TWiT.
So if you've been waiting for some official reviews of Samsung's latest and greatest, the Galaxy S9 Plus, well, today's the day that the embargo obviously lifted on reviews, and that means that we now have a better understanding of what sets this phone apart from previous models and whether you should think about upgrading to it or not. Joining us to answer these questions and more is Mark Spoonauer from Tom's Guide, who published his review this morning. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear. Everything's looking and sounding great. And thank you for taking some time to chat with us today about this.
Sure.
So from your review, right from the onset, the S9 Plus, and I think we all saw this when it was unveiled, has a very similar design to the S8. There are some design touches that are different. Some of those are probably more important than others. How did that strike you in use? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the design really isn't that much different, but at the same time, you could make the case that the Galaxy S9 was a step ahead of the competition, or the S8, right? So they're basically like refining what was already good about this unit. And so in this particular case, you're getting maybe it's like slightly smaller bezels than you had before, where there was almost none before. But on the back, the one thing I do appreciate is that the fingerprint sensor, it's kind of hard to make out because I had the black unit. I kind of prefer the color. Is that when you have the fingerprint sensor, it's underneath the camera as opposed to being to the right. So when you're unlocking the phone, there's less of a chance that you're going to smudge up the lens. But I think overall, when it comes to design, the S9 is still in the lead because the S8 was already a great phone. And that's also because you get a slightly brighter display. That was one of the few complaints that we had before. It wasn't as bright as the iPhone X. It's still not. but it's up there, and it's definitely better to able to see when you're outdoors in bright light.
How does the camera compare to like the Pixel 2 XL and the iPhone X?
It depends on the scenario. So tomorrow morning, we are publishing a photo face-off between the S9, the Pixel 2 XL, and the iPhone X. And what's interesting on our results is that the low-light performance of the S9 is better than before. But there are some circumstances where the Pixel 2 is even better. And I'm not sure like why that is, whether it's the sensor or maybe it's just better image processing, because Google is using machine learning in their phones to produce better looking photos. Having said that, I do think there are a lot of good looking images on this. So I'll show you guys a couple. So one of my favorites is this one that I took in a completely dark bar. And the fact that you can just make out that detail in the background is pretty great. So that's just one example. And then obviously the super slow-mo video is really great too, because it slows things down to 960 frames per second. And the iPhone X only does 240. So, at first when I started using all of this, is not very fun. But then I went to the park and I started recording this guy playing ping pong.
Yeah, and that's the article also.
So like it makes like the everyday, things that you might see look that much more dramatic and epic because it slows things down so much. And what was cool is that I went up to the guy afterwards, and he's like, he actually knew what it was right away. He's like, "Is that the Galaxy S9?" I said, "I'm going to be pre-ordering that myself." So he was pretty excited about it, and I think it is a cool feature because if you look at the footage, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean it's super sharp. I don't know. I don't know how often you end up using a slow-mo feature on a camera necessarily, but it's really cool that it can do it. And I mean, the quality is really great. Anything that I've seen from this, and I think the Sony camera from one of their phones last year, similar system. I mean, it's just really impressive that we're getting this in our pocket now, this level of quality.
Yeah, my 12-year-olds use the slow-mo feature very often. Very big fans of the slow-mo guys. It's popular with the tweens these days. So I know you tried out the emoji selfie tool, which creates emoji based on your picture. What did you think of that?
I did not like it, like a lot of other people. I sort of liken it to a deranged animated of yourself. So it doesn't really look like you, and it's cool that you can dress it up and customize it, but it's when you record video with it, if you play that video, it's very glitchy looking, and it's kind of creepy. So part of me wishes that it's just something that they worked on in the background and then rolled out once they had a more sophisticated front camera. It just feels like a Me Too feature. to me in terms of trying to catch up with the iPhone 10.
Yeah, the Animoji. And I feel like there's that, it's the uncanny valley.
Yes,
like, I mean,
absolutely.
I like Animoji because they're animals, and I like the Bitmoji because it doesn't really look like me, but put them together and it's all wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried it with my daughter, and she's 13, and she uses Bitmoji, she uses Snapchat. And so not only did it not look like her, it actually created an AR emoji where it had a little bit of acne, like right up here. And she's like, so it got everything wrong except that. And she said, I hate this.
That's so strange.
Let me guess, she wants an iPhone.
Yeah, she already has that.
She's like, yeah, this is fun and games and everything, Dad, but I already have what I want. Well, you know, speaking of software is, I feel like this is a conversation that is had every single year as relates to Samsung, is that they love to build out software that does really cool things. It works really well on the stage when they're showing it off. It does its job for selling a device, for making someone go, wow, that's a really cool feature, I'd love to have that. But then later, I think you know, the uptake on people who are actually using those software features is a whole lot lower than maybe even they expect it will be when they purchase it. Is that kind of the same with what you're seeing with the AR emoji and other software touches with the S9?
Yeah, I think another good example of that is probably some of the augmented reality features that Samsung has stuffed into this phone. So with Bixby Vision, and Bixby is sort of their answer to Siri, but not really, because it does so many different things. So a good example is that, like, let's say if you're looking at a foreign language, a menu, a sign, or something like that, it'll try to translate it. And I would say, like, sometimes I got it right, sometimes it didn't. What you're looking at right there is a place finder feature, and I use that somewhere else. Like, I was pointing directly at, you know, one restaurant, and it showed a salad shop like 2 places down. And I feel like Google does a much better job with this sort of thing with Google Lens, which is now built into Google Photos. But I think, like, the larger issue, and I think this is what your point is getting at, is like, should Samsung really be focusing on software when they're really just great at hardware? And, you know, like, would people just be better off, like, having Google Lens in that case and have it built in? Or, you know, easier access to Google Assistant? And I think the answer is we'll see, because they paid so much money for that startup, the team that was behind Siri to begin with. And I don't really see, like, we've seen the fruits of their labor yet when it comes to Bixby.
So I know this is a really crazy question, but how did it work for phone calls?
That's shocking.
I didn't make too many of them, but what I did like is the fact that the speakers are a lot louder than before, because there are stereo speakers. And so that's good, not only when you're listening to music, but especially when you're using the GPS in the car, which I used a lot during my testing. And you appreciate that because you can even hear it over the radio. So I did like that part.
Yeah, I always appreciate that aspect of it, how it sounds through the speaker and everything, because for a couple of years now, the stereo in my car has not worked. So if I want to listen to anything, it's coming from the speaker on my phone. And it's been really eye-opening, just the huge difference in volume and sound quality that you get when you're locked into that. I've come to really appreciate phones that deliver really great, loud, clear, crisp sound quality in that regard. So I'm curious to play around with the S9 when I get that here. I think next week I'm going to be receiving mine. What about security features? So obviously the fingerprint sensor moved to a better place. We can all agree it was horrible where it was placed before. But that's not the only security touch that they have in here. They have the combo face iris scan, even though it's not happening at the same time. How did that fare? Did that kind of make you forget about the fingerprint sensor, or what did you opt for?
Well, in my case, I kind of like using the intelligence scan in general, even though it's not as convenient as Face ID, because all you have to do is basically just turn on the power button, you stare at the phone, and then you're logged in. Unlike the iPhone 10, you don't even have to swipe up to start using the device. Having said that, I think they're definitely behind when it comes to, you know, versus the true depth sensor on the iPhone 10, because a really good example is that if I was looking down at the phone, it told me to try to hold it up closer to eye level, and I just covered my face. But that's sort of like how, like, weird it looks in public. Like, you could actually unlock your iPhone 10 a lot more subtly, because you could just sort of be looking down like this and then swipe up. and I think that's one of the drawbacks of the fact that they're using a combination of iris scanning and face recognition, and the fact that they even have to combine them to get close to Face ID tells you how far apart that they are.
So I know the battery life was in the plus category for this phone. How does that battery life compare to the Pixel, the newest Pixel, and the iPhone 10?
So it's actually in the middle. So we saw close to 11 hours on our battery test, which is basically web surfing over LTE. In this case, we always try to use T-Mobile so that we're on the same network and we're comparing like with like. So as you can see there, so the Pixel 2 XL is about an hour longer, so that is significant when you're talking about something as demanding as this task. And the iPhone 10 is not that far behind. In fact, if we ran the test a few more times, they might be closer. But the average smartphone for us is about 9 hours and 50 minutes. So all of the phones that you see here are above the smartphone average. It's just that the S9 Plus is sort of in the middle of the pack when it comes to flagship phones.
So overall, it kind of sounds like what I expected out of people's time with the S9 is kind of proving itself. This isn't a major step forward. It's it's great. Get this if your idea is that you want to get the latest and greatest Samsung device. But if you have an S8, it's probably not an instant upgrade necessarily. I mean, what does that say about kind of the rate of innovation in smartphones right now? Things have really stabilized at this point, right?
Yeah. A lot of analysts are saying that sales are flat to down, right? So that's certainly a concern. And I think that's part of the issue. It's that a lot of people are holding on to their phones longer because they do pretty much everything that they need. And it's interesting. It's creating this tension within the industry where a lot of people might be faulting Samsung for coming out with seem like gimmicky features. But in a way, you need those catchy things, even if they're not all that practical, because it gets people excited about doing things that they haven't done with the phone before. Right? If Samsung came out and said, hey, look, you're going to get longer battery life, a brighter display, and faster speed, that wouldn't make for a very interesting commercial.
Right.
But I feel like that's more like marketing than it is necessarily necessary.
Yeah. And Samsung, I mean, as far as smartphone manufacturers are concerned, Samsung does a pretty good job with their marketing. Like they kind of know how to hit those notes. They have the market share to exploit that. Apple does an amazing job on that front too, and that's probably why they're the two major smartphone players. Google try as it might with its promotional arm, it makes great ads, but for whatever reason it doesn't connect. It doesn't move serious amounts of phone, and you would think that a company as large as Google could figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think Google's biggest problem is they just don't have the distribution. They're limited to a single carrier. Most people still don't buy their phones unlocked, even though you can. And I really feel like, despite some of the drawbacks we've talked about with the Galaxy S9 Plus, in our case, in terms of what we reviewed, it is our top Android phone now. And even though our iPhone 10 is the closest, is our #1 pick overall, the S9 is the best Android phone. And it's the most well-rounded big screen phone that you can get for the money, because when you talk about value, it's it starts at $740, and then it's so $840 for the S9 Plus, $720 for the S9, and the iPhone 10 sells for $1,000. So you're talking about a difference of $160, and I feel like that really needs to be talked about in terms of what's best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Spoonauer from Tom's Guide, really appreciate you taking time to share your thoughts on the S9. I'm looking forward to getting mine next week, and I'm sure I'll have things to say about that when I do, and we'll compare and contrast. We really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, guys.
We'll talk to you soon.